London's Great Exhibition of 1851. The city choice selection process wasn't really a selection. Queen Victoria's husband, Albert, was credited with being the driving force behind the Great Exhibition of 1851, but it was mainly because of Henry Cole. Henry's hobbies included being a journalist and a part of the arts. In 1846, in his role as a council member of the Society of the Arts, Henry was introduced to Prince Albert and they hit it off. The Royal Charter changed the society's name to the Royal Society for the Encouragement of the Arts, Manufactures, and Commerce. This is because of Henry and Prince Albert's relationship. Involved with the Royal Charter, Henry Cole was impressed by the much larger scale of the French industrial expedition of 1844. Henry thought Prince Albert could help him with his support to stage a similar event in England. Initially, there was little interest in the concept of the exhibition by the government during that day. The purpose of this exhibition was for it to be competition and encouragement, but most of all, it was supposed to be self-financing. They wanted it to be bigger and better than the French could ever organize. Joseph Paxton's design has been adapted from a glass and iron conservatory he had originally produced for the Duke of Devonshire's Chatsworth House. It soon became the Crystal Palace. The Duke of Wellington backed the idea of Hyde Park in central London. That's where they wanted the Great Exhibition to be. This Crystal Palace was amended to accommodate the park's rather large elm trees before building finally began. There wasn't a lot of controversy for this particular World's Fair. One of the biggest problems was where the credit was going. Rather than the credit going towards Henry Cole, the person who came up with this idea for London, much of the praises went towards Queen Victoria and her husband Albert. In order for the Great Exhibition to work, the credit had to go to Prince Albert and Queen Victoria to get any publicity. With this publicity, it resulted in a daily sellout of the tickets at the World's Fair. One thing that was interesting for our group was not during the World's Fair, but after was the burning of the Crystal Palace. On November 30th, 1936, the Crystal Palace was destroyed in one of the greatest fires of London. The cause is unknown, but the fire moved so quick because of its poor condition from years of wear and tear and how strong the wind was. This building was 990,000 square feet of cast iron and plate glass. At 7 p.m., the palace's manager saw a red glow from the building. Walking closer, he found two night watchmen trying to stop the fire that had started in the women's cloakroom and spread to the central transept. 100,000 made their way to Sydenham Hill to watch the fire. 88 fire appliances and 438 men from 4 brigades tried to save the building, but it didn't work. This wasn't the only time that the building suffered from a fire. It also suffered in 1866, and the north transept was destroyed and never rebuilt. While researching the fire, I was unknown about what the word transept meant. Looking into it, it is a cross-like building. So knowing that the building was a cross, there must have been some religion connected to it. While I was researching it, more controversy came up about the Great Exhibition of 1851. So during this time period, many were anti-Catholic, and many Protestants roundly condemned the exhibits that were associated with Catholicism. Catholics thought this exhibition was also an example of religious repression. Most people who came to the exhibit and were welcomed were generally Jews, Unitarians, Quakers, Congregationalists, and a wide spectrum of Anglicans.
So when it came to the profit or analysis of the fair, the prices would vary according to the date of visit. So ticket prices would tend to decrease when London did not have as many wealthy people. The form of currency that they used was guineas for a season ticket, but for women they'd usually only have to pay only 2 guineas, or £1 per day for the first 2 days only. The prices would change shillings daily, so there was never really a set price. However, on Fridays it would be set at 2 shillings and 6 pence, though on Saturdays it remained to be 5 shillings. A total of 2,500 tickets were printed for the opening day, and they were all bought. So more than 6 million people visited, which at that time was nearly half of the Britain population. And even with the reduced ticket prices for the working class, the show profited the equivalent of £12 million today, although this is just a rough estimate. In the slides, you can see that on the left, those are what guineas looked like, the middle shows shillings, and the far right shows what pence were. And obviously the currency that we used, that I included, was the form of currency in England because the fair is in London. So when it came to the music, the architecture, and the fashion of the fair, the music was mostly classical and symphonic. So 2 songs I found were Crown Him with Many Crowns and Old Folks at Home. They were both written in 1851. Crown Him with Many Crowns is written by Matthew Bridges and Godfrey Thring, and then Old Folks at Home was written by Stephen Foster. So I actually couldn't include really any musical from these the audio of it, just because it's so old, so there was no authentic sound that I could find. But for Old Folks at Home, I included a little kind of a cover of it, and then the actual way it's played. And then you could see that for fashion, that's the actual dress that that Queen Victoria, who was was one of the endorsers of the fair, worn, and she's one of the people that brought a lot of the publicity to it. And then I just included a little bit of the architecture as part of the art because it was a very sophisticated building, and as you can see from these images, you can see how it was built and how everything was set accordingly. So lastly, what makes the fair notable of something that is historically important? Firstly, the person who the people that promoted it today, which were Prince Albert and Queen Victoria, and they were the royal family at the time. So that's something that really drew people's attention to it because of these endorsers and how they publicized the fair to be something so great, which drew obviously a lot of attention, which took actual attention from one of the actual creators of the fair, which is actually spoken about in The Rabbit Hole. So then another thing it's known for mostly is its spectacular inventions. So back to the architecture of the World Fair, it's set in different areas. So one of them was manufacturing machines and tools, and it was a spacious gallery. It held things such as power drills, stamping machines, large lathe used to shape wheels for railroad cars. It was found fascinating because of the machines that could also turn raw cotton into finished cloth. Then there was also a hall that contained agricultural devices made of cast iron. There were also early steam tractors and steam-powered machines to grind grain. And then back to what I was talking about, the different floors, there was another floor, which was actually the second floor, dedicated to the things of music. So in conclusion for this, the fact that this one place held so much information and tools that were advanced for its time had perplexed people because they previously hadn't seen anything like it, because it was 1851 and those inventions were still very new. In the slides, I included a picture of Prince Albert and Queen Victoria. Those are some images of them. And then the second slide after that just shows how the art and like the tools were set up, and that's how people would view things. I couldn't find a real photo of it. This is just like a picture that someone drew and painted of it, but you can get like a basic idea of how things were set up and how they looked.
Numbering in 13,000 in total, the exhibits included a jacquard loom, envelope machine, kitchen appliances, steel-making displays, and a reaping machine that was sent from the United States. The Koh-i-Noor, meaning the Mountain of Light, was the world's largest known diamond in 1851. The Dairy-Noor, one of the rare pale pink diamonds in the world, was also there too. Discovered only in 1850, the finest Irish pennyroyal brooch was exhibited by the Dublin jeweler George Waterhouse, who also displayed with his fashionable Celtic rivalry jewelry. Frederick Bakewell demonstrated a pioneer to today's fax machine. William Chamberlain demonstrated the world's first voting machine. The first modern pay toilets were installed, with 827,280 visitors paying the 1 penny fee to use them. Firearms manufacturer Samuel Colt demonstrated his prototype for the 1851 Colt Navy and also his older Walker and Dragoon revolvers. The American Cup yachting event began with a race held in conjunction with the Great Exhibit. The first single cast iron frame for a piano was shown from Copenhagen, Denmark. The trophy telescope, so called because it was considered the trophy of the exhibit. The city was in full swing. Britain wanted to provide the world with hope for a better future. Europe had just struggled through 2 difficult decades of political and social upset, and now they have hoped to show that their technology was key to a better future. 6 million people, which was equivalent to a third of the entire population of Britain at the time, visited the Greek expedition. The average daily attendance was 42,831, with a peak attendance of 109,915 on October 7th. The Great Expedition caused controversy as the opening approached, and some conservatives feared that the mass of visitors might become a mob. Many notable exhibits and events were built for the fair. A special building called the Crystal Palace was built for the fair and was designed by Joseph Paxton. The building was built in just 9 months and was architecturally adventurous. It took the form of a massive glass house and was 8,848 feet long by 452 feet wide. It was constructed from cast iron frame components and glass. From the interior, the building's large size was emphasized with trees and statues. The Crystal Palace was an enormous success. It was considered an architectural wonder, but also an engineering triumph, which showed the importance of the exhibition. The building was later moved in 1854 in an enlarged form of the Sydenham Hill in South London, an area renamed Crystal Palace, but was destroyed by a fire on November 30th, 1936.